We on, Gary? We're on, okay. Good evening and welcome to the Town of Eastchester Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for November 13, 2018. We begin our meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag. With liberty and justice for all. Yeah. Okay. Good evening, all. Before I call the roll, I just want to go over some of the ground rules, which I do before every meeting. Firstly, we utilize Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order. Secondly, actually, these 2 points go together. This is our last meeting for 2018. We do not meet in December, and I'm mentioning this because our 2019 calendar is out. We generally meet the second Tuesday of every month. We do not meet July, August, and December. So if anyone is planning at home an application, keep in mind, as the applicants before us here tonight know, as a term and condition of your application, items that are on first time are not decided the night they're heard. So any item on tonight, the earliest will be decided will be January. So anyone contemplating an application for next year, if you make the January calendar, the earliest it would be decided would be February. Okay. Now tonight, when I call the roll, there's one item on for resolution. If the applicant is not here, it'll proceed to resolution. Because we have a full board, there'd be no reason for the applicant to adjourn unless the applicant has some compelling reason to adjourn. It'll be resolved. For the 4 items of new business, just so that you know the protocol, your package and all the items submitted therewith are a matter of public record. You're not compelled to read the 5 or 3-part test depending on your application. You can if you want. It neither help or hurt your application. And then there's an opportunity for the public to be heard. And in between, the board will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So, having said all of that, let's start with our roll. So the first item, which is on for resolution, is item 18-40. That's 83 Grand Boulevard. Is the applicant ready to proceed? Mr. Yanacito, you ready to proceed? Okay. For new business, item number 2, that's 18-4374 Parkview Drive. Is the applicant here?
74 Parkview?
74 Parkview Drive, yes.
Yes.
And you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Number 3, that's 18-37, 239 Main Street.
Yes.
Ready to proceed? Thank you. Number 4, 18-32, 210 Hillside Place.
Yes.
Mr. Catunia, ready to proceed? Okay. And the last item on the calendar under new business is 18-36 Holy Mount Cemetery. Ready to proceed? Thank you. Okay, prior to our resolution, I make a motion to approve the minutes from the October 9, 2018 meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Item number 1, I make a motion to adopt a resolution approving 18-4085 Grand Boulevard. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. DeMarco. To the vote, Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Nerzia?
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That application's been approved 5-0. Okay. Now, first item of new business, 18-4374 Parkview Drive. State your name and address for the record before you do that, and while you're setting up, just to know that this is an application proposing a rear addition to an existing single-family residence. You may proceed.
I'm an architect retained by Mr. Greg Parada, the owner of the house. I have the mailing receipts. You guys want them? As you stated, it's a single-family residence on a wider than normal lot. It has a non-compliant existing side yard at 5 foot 2 inches. We are proposing to extend that non-compliant side yard an additional 20 feet, which was the depth of the addition we're putting on the back of the house. The addition will not be visible from the street. This site, Parkview, is on the bottom here, and then this is State Highway to the back. So our rear yard variance is for 97 square feet. Our side yard variance is for an additional 97 square feet along the side yard, not impinging any further on the side yard than the existing house already does. That's it.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we usually reserve time for the board to ask questions, so I'll start with Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Cahalan?
None.
Mr. Miller?
None.
Mr. Nerzia?
No questions.
Mr. DeMarco?
No, nothing, thanks.
I have nothing at this time. I make a motion to open this matter to the public for public hearing. Is there-
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, would anyone like to come forward and be heard on this application? Okay, seeing nobody, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if you need to anything further, but I'm duty-bound to ask the board if they have any further questions or comments. Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Nope.
Mr. Nerzia?
No.
Mr. DeMarco?
No.
And the only comment I have is that your application, I reviewed it thoroughly and seemed to cover all parts of the five-part test, and certainly in the character of the neighborhood, and you've laid it out pretty cleanly for us. So the only thing I have is a motion to adjourn this matter for resolution at the next meeting. Second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
See you in January. Thank you.
Shall. Good holidays to you. Number 3, 18-37, 239 Main Street. Name and address for the record while you're setting up. This is a proposed addition and alteration to an existing 3-story, 3-family residence.
Alrighty. Yes, as you said. Good evening, Chair, board members. My name is Adamo Majorano from Community Designs and Engineering. On behalf of the applicant, Christopher Durr, we are proposing rear addition and alterations to the residence at 239 Main Street. It's okay. So,
Can you hold on one second? Can we take that outside, gentlemen, please? Thank you. I'm sorry. Continue.
So currently, the house is owned and occupied by 3 generations of the same immediate family. It has been this way for many years, and they would love to continue that moving forward. But as a result of time changes and the status of the family, the proposed addition and alterations are to better accommodate their needs and desires of today's living. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is the house is broken up by an apartment on each floor, first, second, and third. Proposed what we are going to have is 2 apartments on the first floor, and then 1 apartment on the second and third floor. In doing so, we are pushing the home further back. Right now, the home is existing non-conforming. It's in an RB zone, but it's regulated as a M700 zoning district. So it is non-conforming, and any type of alteration that we do will require zoning variance. So just to kind of go through the variances that we are suggesting, there's a right side variance for, right now, the existing is 2.37 feet, and we're increasing that nonconformity. Required is 22 feet. Left side is 10.4 feet, and again, required is 22 feet. For the parking spaces, we're required to have 6 parking spaces. We only have 4, although existing right now there's 3, so we are adding an additional parking space. The backup aisle is 18 feet what we are proposing, then the minimum is 25. Access aisle, it has to be 12 feet, but we only have 9.5 feet. It's a very, shallow lot, so most of these conditions are existing, but we're trying to, as best we can, to limit the amount of, with the addition, limit the amount of changes we are making. Overall, the impervious surfaces will remain the same, so we're not increasing that by any means. And last but not least, the last variance is the front yard, the front roof overhang over the doors. Aesthetically, we're trying to also dress up the house as well. So those mostly are just aesthetically to dress up the front elevation over the 2 front doors. And yeah, other than that, any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start to my left of the board. Mr. Cahalan, any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
How many people reside in the house in that building right now?
Currently, there's it's a three-family home, but there's the owner, which is,
I don't need the generations, I just need a number. Is it 6, is it 12, is it 18? Just give me a number.
there are 2 children and 5 adults.
How many cars are parked there right now?
Right now, I would say 3.
3.
Yeah.
So you're down 1 parking space already? Or because of the increase?
Right now,
you're gonna be
currently, there's
down 2?
3. What's that?
There's 3 parking spaces available right now.
Yes,
You're required to have 6,
yes.
so you're down 3 spaces.
We're down 3 right now. Ultimately, we're going to be down 2, because we're going to
Down
add
2, you're
additional.
gonna add 1.
Exactly.
Okay. How many people drive cars there? Is it just 3, or are they planning to lease this out to another family member, or
That's not the case. They're planning to,
how old are the kids?
the kids are 4 and 8.
So they won't be driving anytime soon?
Yes.
Okay, good.
6 maybe.
Okay. And there's nothing else you can do with the aisle access? That's 9.5, that's tight.
Basically, yeah, so the side yard is 10 and a half feet, so there's a little landscape buffer there. We can increase it, just the only problem with that is it'll increase the impervious surface, and that'll be another variance that we would be required.
In this
So,
particular case, I don't know, I'd make a trade, but that's just me. But I'm not the architect.
Sure. I mean, it's existing now, that 9.5 feet to get in and out. They could easily access. It's the turnaround that might be tough, but again, we're limited to the landscape buffer on the side and the overall, when they have 42 feet in the property, so we're very limited and tight.
Oh, I see that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Miller?
None.
Mr. Nurzia?
No questions.
Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing.
I just have one question about the roof overhang. What is it currently now?
Right now, we have 11 inches in the front to the
Okay.
property line, so we're only going out that to the property line.
Yeah, I wanted you to highlight that a little bit,
Sure,
only
yeah.
because,
It's
yeah, I'm like a
right there.
millennial. I prefer the video to live action, so
Okay.
I couldn't see it from here, but
Sure.
it appears that it's an ongoing, non-conforming use, and you just,
Exactly.
okay, I understand that now. Okay, I have nothing further. I make a motion to open this matter to the public for a public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Would anyone like to be heard on this application? Okay, seeing nobody, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, back to the board, Mr. Cahalan?
Nothing
Mr.
further?
Miller?
Nope.
Mr. Nurzia?
Nope.
Mr. Marco?
No, thank you.
I have nothing further. I make a motion to adjourn this matter for resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Majorano.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
All right, you too.
Number 4, 18-32-210 Hillside Place. While you're setting up, this is an application proposing a hipped roof over an existing one-story legal non-conforming commercial garage. Name and address for the record, and please proceed.
Good evening. My name is John Cotugno. I'm the architect for the Gentili family, who has owned this building for more than 50 years. They cannot be here tonight, the father and the son. And as you said, we're here for a variance to do 2 things. The work is not going to add any square footage to the building. They have a problematic 2-level flat roof that they like to put a hip roof so that they don't get the leaks in the wood frame structure that they've been getting over the years for many years now. And in doing that, we also like to add a porch in the front. So you see those 2 big overhead doors. The men are constantly bringing in materials, taking out materials, and in inclement weather, they get wet in rain and snow. So that's the purpose of the porch and the roof. Like I said, we're not adding any square footage. We're here for variances because this is in an RB zone and they require a 30-foot rear yard setback, and this building happens to be right on the property line, 0. It sounds like a big variance, but it's only a hip roof. Like I said, it's not going to obstruct anybody's views or anything else. And right now, there is no drainage. There is a gutters and leaders, but it drains directly onto the ground and eventually, I guess, goes to the neighbor's property. If we get this project through, we're going to put in and hire an engineer and do a whole drainage system for the new gutters and leaders that'll be around all 4 sides of the building. I think it'll look much better than what's there. In doing this job, they're going to straighten out the roof line and re-stucco the building and make it look like a real building.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cotugno. Mr. Cahalan, any questions?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Nope.
Mr. Nurzia?
None.
Mr. DeMarco?
None.
And I have nothing at this time. I make a motion to open this matter to the public for public hearings. Or a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Would anyone like to be heard on this application? Okay, no takers, so I make a motion to close this matter to public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Cahalan, any questions or comments?
None?
Mr. Miller?
Nope.
Mr. Nurzia?
No, sir.
Mr. DeMarco?
No, thank you.
Mr. Cotugno, the only thing I could say is that, yep, your presentation is fairly straightforward. It meets or answers the tests for the variance, but more importantly, you clarified that you're really just adding to the elevation. The structure's staying the same. At a later date, when you go before planning and the building department, you'll be improving, actually, the drainage and water runoff situation. So I make a motion to adjourn this matter, for resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Nurzio, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Cotugno.
Thank you.
Have a good to you as well. Okay, last item on the calendar for tonight. This is 18-36 Holy Mount Cemetery. And while you're setting up, this is a use variance to construct a one-story columbarium building and exterior columbarium consisting of a series of stone walls and walkways.
Good evening. Stephen Silverberg, the law firm of Silverberg Zelantis, on behalf of the applicant. I have with me our architect, engineer. We have a member of the parish council. We realize that because this is use variance, you may have some additional questions, so we wanted to be able to respond. We submitted what I'm sure you feel was a lengthy letter detailing our application. Hopefully you were able to read through it without falling asleep. I'm just going to try to summarize without taking too much of your time.
Please do, Counselor, proceed.
And as we said, it's a use variance. There's also an area variance for the front yard. The cemetery has existed here for 135 years, long before there were any zoning regulations, so it's a legal non-conforming use. The cemetery currently doesn't have any vacant space for burial plots. There are a couple of vacant spots, but they've been sold already. So there's no place for parishioners who pass away or have relatives who pass away to use the cemetery. In addition, there's a minimal source of income to the cemetery, so it's losing money every year. This impedes the ability of the church to effectively maintain the property, both for themselves and for the community, so that it doesn't look run down. The church wants to propose a balance here of niches that will be sufficient to give them an ongoing revenue to cover their costs of, one, building them, and two, carrying the property going forward so they can maintain it properly without diverting other funds from the church to pay for that. And it'll involve the demolition of an existing structure on the property, replacement of that, and then a wall that will be 5.5 feet high that will contain niches in it. There'll also be niches in the building that they're constructing. And what I put up there is an example of what was constructed at another church as far as the wall is concerned, just so you can see a photograph of something, what it would look like. The ZBA actually granted a variance in 2004, use variance in 2004, to put in a mausoleum with crypts and a number of niches What we're proposing now will actually be less intrusive because it will be bulk-wise smaller than what was done before. Joe, maybe you can show the profile that you had.
The original, just to give you an idea, here's the property line. The original approval is shown in gray. That was the bulk of the building that was originally approved. We're keeping the existing building, and this is all eliminated. It's not part of the project anymore. So the gray area is omitted, just so you get a scale of the two. And this is the existing building that's on the site now. Thank you.
Right, so again, the bulk is going to be significantly less than what was approved by this board. I don't know whether any of you were members then, but the prior board in 2004.
I was here.
Okay, okay, you're guilty. So in 2004, you approved a much larger facility. We're scaling that back, putting in more niches and eliminating the crypts. Now, with regard to the just the overall application, while we think that we meet all of the requirements for an area variance and a use variance, irrespective of anything else, as we pointed out in our letter, case law says that deference is supposed to be given to religious uses. So the zoning board is supposed to, make, as the court has said, make every effort to accommodate a religious use. In this case, with regard to the area variance, we're looking for a setback variance of 19.8 feet, going from 30 feet to 10.2 feet, and just really fast going through the balancing test. Whether there's an undesirable change produced in the neighborhood, again, this is an existing facility. We're going to have the building replacing the existing storage structure and then building the stone wall that'll look similar to that, which shouldn't have an impact upon the residential nature of the neighborhood. The area variance is, whether there's any other way to do it, it's really, this is the only feasible way to do this area variance because there's not a lot of room on the site, and in order to accommodate an appropriate number of niches so that they can generate sufficient income to maintain the property and pay for the construction of the niches and provide burial services to their parishioners, which obviously is an important aspect of this. This is the only place where they can put it. Whether the requested variance is substantial, yes, as an area variance, this is probably considered a substantial variance. On the other hand, the courts have said that just because it's a substantial variance, it's not a reason to turn it down if it's really not going to have any impacts on the neighborhood, and we don't believe this will. And then the other thing is, will it have a impact on the physical environmental condition of the neighborhood? Again, this is not going to result in any adverse effect on the neighborhood. You're going to have this nice stone wall and a stone building. And whether the alleged difficulty is self-created, it's not. This is a result of a 135-year-old cemetery that's filled up, and they need to be able to accommodate their parishioners. And they need to be able to pay to maintain it. On the use variance portion of it, again, as I noted before, religious uses is supposed to be given some deference, and also your board in 2004 granted a use variance, and the courts have said, and we cite this in our letter, that a zoning board should adhere to its prior precedent. And as we discuss in our letter in detail, and I'll just mention briefly here, the findings of this board in 2004 really have not changed. And by the way, yes, there was an approval in 2004, and for various reasons, it wasn't built at that time. And then since then, the approval has run out based upon your local code. One is the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return. And again, your board found, and I'm just going to read a quote from your prior resolution. Unlike other applications for use variances before this board, this application is unique in that no profit will be realized by the applicant as a result of the proposed action. The church initiated the proposed project in response to the community's need for additional burial sites. The funds to be generated, and this is the same here, by the sale of, in that case, crypts and niches, will fund the maintenance and perpetual care of the cemetery and will be held in a dedicated fund for the cemetery purposes. The applicant maintains that without the creation of the mausoleum and niche wall, the cemetery will be seriously hindered in its ability to maintain its property and to care for the burial sites. And that's the condition now. If anything, it's gotten worse. This analysis is still fully applicable here. The church already suffers a significant deficit annually in its operations, and we therefore, and we pointed out that it costs about $145,000 a year just to maintain the cemetery, and there's approximately a $61,000 a year deficit from the perpetual care fees that they have allocated and other cemetery services that they charge. So every year, the church is losing $61,000 on the current facility. We provided you with spreadsheets that show that they did an analysis, and of course these are estimates because we're going out 20 years, but that if they can build these number of niches, they will sell a certain number every year, and that money will, one, pay for the construction of the niches, and two, provide for ongoing maintenance and perpetual care of the site, at least for the foreseeable future. And therefore, the church really has a hardship here. Secondly, the question is whether the alleged hardship is related to the property in question is unique. And again, in 2004, your board found that the alleged hardship relating to the property is clearly unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. Cemeteries are not permitted use within the town, and Holy Mount Cemetery is the only cemetery in the town. Therefore, the requested use variance to permit the expansion or intensification of the cemetery use can only apply to the subject property and no other properties within the town. So again, you made a finding that this is unique. That hasn't changed. The third point for use variance, the request for use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Again, it's a cemetery. It's going to continue to be a cemetery. There'll be a wall there. And again, it'll be smaller than what was in bulk than what was approved before. And this board found the use variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Holy Mount Cemetery has been in existence for approximately 120 years. Homes that have been constructed in the vicinity of the site have clearly known of the existence of the cemetery. The proposed project will not materially alter the existing character of the neighborhood, and I won't keep reading, but you make additional findings there as well. And finally, the alleged hardship has not been self-created. Clearly, this is not self-created. It's a church, it's a cemetery, it's been here for 135 years now. And again, you found in 2004, the alleged hardship has not been self-created since there are no other existing cemeteries within the town, nor is there an opportunity for the applicant to create additional burial sites on any other property in the town since cemeteries are not a permitted use. As a result, the applicant can only can only create additional burial sites within the boundaries of the existing non-conforming cemetery. The board finds that the proposed project is the only feasible method for addressing the need to provide additional burial sites for the community within the town. This analysis would certainly still apply, and therefore we believe we've met all of the criteria, irrespective of the fact that as a religious use, we should be given deference. And if you have any questions, I have people here to answer them, or I might be able to answer them.
Thank you, Counsel, for your presentation. Mr. Kalin, any questions?
Yes. I don't understand your projections on the perpetual care item. I know you're going out a long period of time, but you maintain a fixed number for many, many years. I would think that that number would rise slightly as you project out into the future. I don't know if it's a union that maintains it or it's non-union, but, you know, the way the federal government's going, they're going to raise minimum wage till God only knows when. So maybe God can help us on this. I didn't understand that projection. Okay. The other thing I'd like to point out is you have two separate boards. You keep going back to the past and two different people. I mean, I'm the only one that was here in 2004.
Right.
This is a different board. Everything you're saying is true, but you have to understand these gentlemen think differently than the 2004 board would think.
Yes, let me answer your second question first, okay? Because that's the legal question. As I said, in our papers, we cite
I read them.
New York courts, and the court said that if a board creates a precedent, it has to demonstrate why there's been a change that would have them come to a different conclusion. It doesn't say because there are different people on the board. It says the board. So therefore, this board, unless you can find differentiation between what occurred in 2004 and what is going on now, there's no basis for overruling that precedent. And moreover, since what we're proposing has less bulk than what was approved in 2004, we think it has less of a potential impact. With regard to the financial issue, can our parish council person respond? Why don't you come
Can you
up
please,
and
come up and-
introduce yourself?
For the record,
Say who you
please.
are.
Hi, I'm Jean Altino. I'm parish trustee and a member of the Finance Council and a town resident for 34 years. So is the question, I wasn't understanding the concern about the perpetual care. We're obligated to
The
put
point of putting, the point of having these is outside of people wanting to stay in the community, which I fully understand, you have a problem with funding. You're $61,000 or more every year. So you're going to sell these columbariums at a fixed price, and then you're going to put a perpetual care fee, I would imagine, when people are buried.
Right.
Right?
Well, that's part of the sale
Right,
prices.
but what I don't see is I don't see that revenue growing over time because of cost. I would think in the year, 2025, it's going to be more expensive to mow the grass than it is today. And I don't see that number changing across the lines.
You don't see the maintenance
I don't see the maintenance
number.
number changing.
The ma-
I was kind of surprised that wouldn't have some kind of a percentage tick up after 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I agree. There probably should be some inflation estimate in the
Somewhere
maintenance
in there.
number. I thought you were talking about the perpetual care, which we actually, that 25% that we have to put aside, we can't use that for normal
No,
maintenance. Okay.
I'm familiar with all of that. It's just,
Okay.
I'm a numbers guy, and when you give me numbers, I look at them.
Yep, no, so am I, believe me. But, we can certainly put in an inflation assumption.
Only for your own benefit, because
Yep.
you're doing something that, you're trying to make revenue out of to preserve the cemetery, and if you're not going to have enough money projected out, although it may be necessary to do this or not necessary, but to me, you're trying to fill a gap in the budget of the church.
There is
which
ano-
it does, but, I would want to be very tight on that number.
No, I agree. There's another piece that we are allowed to use interest on that perpetual care fund for maintenance, and that will continue to grow as we sell more niches and we have more perpetual care put away. So that could offset the inflation amount on the maintenance. And we could change.
Unless the market does what it did over the past 10 years and went down to 2%. So, you got the bell curve, you don't know where it's going to lie.
True.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Miller?
I have none.
Mr. Nerzia?
Yeah, two points. The first one is I'm actually a parishioner at Immaculate Conception, and that being said, it's not going to affect how I view this. I'll look at it impartially. But the second thing is the legal point.
Sure.
In the 2004 approval, can you just clarify what the mausoleum, how many crypts or spaces it would have held compared to the 1,620 here? The point I really want to make is the parking issue. I know there was a police report from 2004 that the additional parking at that time wouldn't have had an impact on the neighborhood. I just want to make sure that 1,620 just sounds like a lot of urns or niches, whatever you call it. So I just want to see the usage from then, at that decision, to now. How do you square that? How do you reply to that?
I don't have the exact numbers from the previous. Identify yourself? Oh, Joe Lazarchek, I'm from JPL Architects. I don't have the accurate count from the initial approval, but the crypts are much larger. They're just larger. I'm going to say the grave sites in our proposal is higher than what was previously approved. But the services are much different. So in terms of traffic, there's not going to be any impact or difference between what was previously approved and what's approved now. And they're not going to all be, filled within a week. There's going to be spread out over many years. So it would also be addressed that way with the traffic. And I remember the police report from the original approval had no objection to that. It wasn't a concern. but we'd have to look up the exact number, what was previously approved.
The total was fewer than we're proposing now. And again, this has been before the planning board, correct?
As I recall,
Mr. Cahalan?
yeah, as I recall, the crypts would have generated much more volume to people visiting as opposed to the columbariums back then. And if you've ever been up at the cemetery, it doesn't really get that crowded, just because of the age of the people that have been there. It's generational now, where less people are going to the cemetery. I've been up there for a couple of things, and it's never a real problem to find parking on the site or up the long driveway is the worst possible case. But that doesn't even get down into the Lake Isle area when there's been ceremonies and stuff that I've attended there. But I think the last time there would have been more people visiting because of the way it was laid out with the crypts as opposed to the columbariums, as I recall.
Thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Nerzia?
No other questions.
Thank you, Glenn.
Mr. DeMarco?
I have nothing.
Okay. I just have a point of clarification because I thought your presentation was very thorough and you make certainly a compelling argument as it relates to the use variance, but I want to be clear. There's an old maxim of zoning board review, and it is that the applicant is irrelevant, it's the application. And this is a brand-new application. The logic and the reasoning behind the prior approval is certainly applicable here, and I'm not predisposed, but I think you make a good argument. But there is no precedential value from the last application. This is a brand-new application. So the arguments therein can be set forth, and you've done that. But unless you can show me otherwise, I don't believe that there is any precedential value whatsoever from the prior decision. Can you?
Well, I think, if I can respectfully disagree.
Please.
Because, again, there was a use variance granted to expand the pre-existing non-conforming use. And what we're seeking here is a use variance to expand the pre-existing non-conforming use to provide, again, additional burial space, which was done in the last instance. And in going through, again, I'm not going to repeat myself, but in going through the criteria for the use variance, the findings that this board made with regard to uniqueness and the costs and so forth are applicable today.
Based on that application with those specific facts and circumstances within the application. This is an entirely new application.
But again, yes, I agree that we needed to provide you with financial information regarding today because it could have changed.
Right.
And that's why we provided you with the financial information to show you that they're losing $61,000 a year.
Right.
But as far as the uniqueness of the site, that hasn't changed. As far as the fact that the site is consistent with the character of the neighborhood, that hasn't changed. So I think those findings, if we came in and it turned out that they were making $1 million a year on the cemetery today as opposed to losing money before, I would agree 100% with your analysis that we don't have a precedential effect as far as the dollars and cents proof is concerned. But with regard to the other aspects of a use variance, there's been no change in those things.
Well,
And
let me ask, I'm sorry to interrupt
Mr.
you.
DeMarco, please. Go ahead.
Was the 2004 application, did that include the 1,620 niches?
no,
So that's new to this application.
there were niches and there were crypts.
Okay, how many crypts were in that 2004 application that you?
I think there were 300 and change. It's in the resolution.
So it's a different application to the extent that you're asking for roughly 1,300 more spaces for decegents,
Yeah, it's less
correct?
than 1,300 because there were crypts and there were also
Okay.
niches. But I understand what you're saying.
Let's say, for example, I mean, I think this, I know this is gonna come up, if it hasn't already. Let's say you fill it, and you have 1,600 niches with 1,600 urns. And on Mother's Day, or Veterans Day, or Easter Sunday, family members come to visit a quarter of them, or a half of them. How are you gonna accommodate parking there?
It doesn't happen. As your own member says, very few people to
Well,
actually visit.
these niches will be very new, correct? Once they're constructed, correct?
They're not all going to fill up next year, hopefully.
okay, but-
The fact of the matter is they're going to be purchased over decades, and that's what the projection is for 20 years, so that they feel that it will take decades to fill them, and for people to purchase them. Some people may decide to purchase them now because they're older and they're getting ready for the inevitable, and others will remain empty for many years. So it's not going to happen overnight. And then, frankly, the people who pass away in the next year or two, their relatives may no longer be here 15 years from now for various reasons, so they may never come to visit. And frankly, the reality that I've observed at this point is that, as Mr. Carlin, is it, stated,
Cahalan.
I'm sorry, stated that nowadays most people don't go to visit the cemetery the way they used to.
Well, you would agree with me that if people are purchasing these niches, those might be the people who would visit a cemetery, correct? Because there's, no? See, I know nothing about the cemetery business.
If I may, I don't want to get too far afield. I think the point that Mr. DeMarco was drilling down upon, and I think what we can do is, because I'm not sure if it's going to even be necessary, but I want to reserve, if we need a memorandum from you, an argument on this, because I respectfully do not agree with your point that there is any precedential value whatsoever, and I'd like to not focus on that right now, because I think it takes away from the valid arguments that you're making, and where there's overlap, there's overlap. But again, I think we're getting caught up in this idea that somehow it's res judicata as it relates to what we're hearing today, and it's just not. There's no law that I know of that compels us to follow that decision. But again, the arguments made therein, many of them are applicable tonight, and you've made them. So I think, why don't we reserve that point for a later date, if we need it. We may not need it.
If the board feels like you need to...
I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting. Counselor?
I was going to, word for word, I think you've gotten bogged down.
Great minds think alike.
And I honestly think that there is probably some precedential value in some of the principles. However, it is factually a different application. It is a different time. There are different parking issues. There are a number of different issues so I agree with exactly what the chairman has indicated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Counselor.
If I just may finish
Please.
the thought. If, in fact, the board members feel that there's a need for us to address the issue of parking and how many people would ordinarily visit the site, we'll try to provide that information to you if you think it's important.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. I'm not sure at this time. I think Mark's concern was that people are dying to get in there, but I think we'll address that at a later point, okay? Is that anything further, Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay.
If I
Mr.
may,
Nerzia, please.
Just to follow up on one point. I know at the end of every year, Father Sorgi sends out like a summary of the number of baptisms, weddings, and funerals. Is this all, if this goes through, is this just to the parishioners of Immaculate Conception? Is this marketed to the general public? I'm just trying to get a fix on who is going to be buying these urns or these spaces.
I'm not 100% sure it's primarily the parishioners, but I can't say for sure. But I think it's primarily parishioners.
Okay, and over the past couple of years, I mean, how many funerals has Immaculate Conception or Assumption
We had
actually?
95 funerals last year and only 45 burials, because obviously it's not always a one-to-one.
Yeah.
But some of the funerals, they just can't be buried there because we have no more
Yeah.
space to sell.
Okay,
So we had twice as many funerals as we had burials.
okay, now is 95 kind of like a consistent number, maybe 100?
I would say so.
Okay, so even if all 100 went there, you're talking still a number of years before it reached maximum capacity. Okay, just curious.
And by the way, you reminded me, Father Sorgi had intended to be here, but he was called to Rome, and he's not in the country tonight. That's why he's not here.
No other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nerzia. Okay. I'm going to make a motion to open this matter to the public for a public hearing. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. DeMarco, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so if you want to come, the members of the public that are here, if you want to be heard on this application, we'll try to do this in an orderly fashion. I would ask To avoid being duplicative, if someone says what you say, then I would suggest that maybe you don't need to come up and say it. You'll come up and state your name and address for the record. Let's get a show of hands. How many people are here that would like to speak on this application? Okay, so we're going to go grammar school rules, ladies first. So we'll start with the lady in the farthest away, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. I'm Anna Salerno. I own the property 15 Lakeshore Drive, so I'm the first house when you go into Lakeshore on the left side. Cemetery Lane backs up to my property, so we can get to Cemetery Lane from my property. My main concern about this is the traffic, the parking. It's one lane up and one lane down. I've been home when there's funerals. It's a disaster. And I understand what they're saying about, oh, it's gonna take years to fill. Once people find out that there's spots available now, it's gonna be a hot commodity. I don't want the traffic, I don't want the cars, it's just gonna be a disaster. Not to mention drainage is gonna be a problem. And they were talking about maintenance. I don't know if any of you have been back there, but it is a mess. There's cut down trees, there's leaves, it looks like a forest. It just was never properly maintained. And my thinking is with the road, when they're constructing, it's just gonna get worse. We had to put up over 100 trees to have some sort of privacy from that road. I don't want my trees obstructed, I don't want the property obstructed, and again, it comes down to the traffic. It's a one lane in, one lane out. It's gonna be a problem. There is no parking up there. So I just think the whole thing overall is just gonna be a big problem.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I just
Please,
wanted to add,
Counselor.
when this matter was on, I believe for preliminary site review before the planning board, I guess the sketch, I don't know if there's any drawings of it now, is of one lane going up, there's a circle, and then it comes down the one lane. I believe the indication was that when people come to observe for ceremonies or to visit, they will just kind of park on the side. I believe that issues involving drainage are something that the planning board would also ultimately look at. And if there is a parking or a traffic issue, that is also something that planning would take a look at some point down the line.
Thank you, Counselor. So for the
One
public,
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
One other thing
Go
that I
ahead,
want to bring
proceed.
up. When I sit in my living room at night, I see cars that go up and come down, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Sometimes it's a cop car, just going to check, assess the area, but sometimes it's not. I think generating more traffic to this area will only bring more awareness where kids will go hang out and do things like that. We don't need that. And we have that now because cops do come and patrol the area at night. But then there's nights where they don't, and there's still cars going up there. Who is it? What are they doing? There's no business for anybody to be up there late at night. And I watch this from my living room because I have all glass, so I see it all. That's another concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So just to clarify thank you for your presentation. For the public, what our attorney is explaining is that issues on the site, traffic, parking, construction, drainage, et cetera, are things that would be decided upon by planning and building department. We're really just hearing the variance, the application that it's at variance or with the current law as it relates to use and in certain area particulars. So that's really what we're hearing tonight. Who is next that would like to be heard on this application? Please, sir, come forward.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Lance Wilson. I'm an attorney, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Jerome Lieberwood, seated back there, who reside at 23 Lakeshore Drive. Their home abuts the cemetery, and the new structure can be viewed from their bedroom window, and the new structure will be higher than the structure that's there right now. We have a number of concerns, but a couple of points were raised by the previous speaker, but I'd like to go into a couple of points. Number one, we presume that trees will be removed during the construction of this new facility, and that's going to have an impact, a potential adverse impact on my client's property, particularly with regard to drainage. Now, you mentioned before that the planning board would consider that issue, but I want to raise that on behalf of my clients, a concern that they will have. A second question that we have is whether the applicants have taken into account or have any research or any data regarding the impact of this new structure on the values of their neighbors' properties, the properties that abut the cemetery. We intend to do some research in that regard, and I'm curious as to whether the applicants have considered that in requesting the variance. These are our basic points at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Anyone else like to be heard on this application? I chose you next because of your jacket, so don't embarrass Yankee fans, please.
Maybe being a Yankee fan would help me.
Not here.
Good
It
evening,
does.
Mr. Chairman.
That's why I picked you.
Your dry sense of humor is as I've always remembered it. What's not, I might have missed it, and I apologize.
Name and address for the record,
Oh,
Mr.
it's Christopher
Tiso.
Tiso. We live, when you go to the top of the driveway, back corner, southeast corner, 23 Hunter Drive. So where the two fences meet in the back. I wasn't sure if I missed, what's the height of the new structure compared to the structure that's there now?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I want to hear
I'd
your...
like an answer to that at some point.
Okay,
Just so, I want to see how it relates to the structure that's there.
okay.
18 inches.
Well, I'd like to avoid the crosstalk from the audience, please. And as a general rule, the Zoning Board of Appeals doesn't answer questions from the public, but continue. Maybe we can get you an answer while we're waiting. Continue.
One point I have is I've been there for a little over 17 years, and I have to say the church is not a very good neighbor. There's a couple dead trees that are still there. Every May for me is the fall, because I'm doing the leaves coming off the dead trees. So there's 2 dead trees there. My son and I have more than once gone back there because all the leaves are blown into that corner. They blow them, they leave them, we clean off the headstones, we make a pile, I call the rectory. The rectory sends people over to remove the leaves. I mean, and I'm talking piles. I couldn't even put them in bags if I wanted to. Part of the application that I was reading today also stated that with the money they make on these niches, they're going to use for, I believe they said, repairs, improvements, and maintaining the property. I would like to see as a condition, if the board falls into favor of approving this, I want to see specifically what they're going to improve, what they're going to repair, and just what they're going to do, because they can make generalizations all day long that the fences are in disrepair. What exactly, just like the board puts on requirements when we need a buffer zone, you add plantings and whatnot. What plantings are we going to have around this structure? Do we have any neighbors that are in the direct line of sight of this new? They say it's only a 5'5" wall, but if I was down on that part of Lake Shore and I'm looking direct line of sight to those walls, I would have a serious concern.
Counselor?
Yeah, there are 2 issues that you raise, and one of them, and for those who are watching at home, one of them is the planning board at some point in time will require a landscaping plan that is certified, and they will be required to provide the same type of landscaping that is in the plan, and a landscape architect will have to sign off on it. In addition to that, whatever requirements are imposed by the planning board, there's also an enforcement issue, which is secondary to that, and that is, are they maintaining the property appropriately? And that is something that I would encourage you to contact the building department. We have a code enforcement officer. That is, as the town prosecutor, my position is to make sure the properties are being maintained, fences, for instance, anything like that. So those are two separate issues. One would be a condition in terms of what is put into place, and how they are maintained is something separately in terms of our enforcement, just to kind of clarify that.
I certainly want to see some conditions tacked on to this, just letting us know, the general public that live around the perimeter of the cemetery, which, by the way, is a quaint cemetery, and I would, in my opinion, I'd love to see. It's like fitting a square peg into a round hole. Leave it alone. Sometimes things are just better left alone, and I think this is one of those instances where we're trying to get all these extra niches in there. What is it, 1,600 and some odd niches? That's all those extra families, you know. It's like the builder who's building a building and says, oh, there's only going to be one car for each unit when we know better. So the other point I wanted to make was back in 2004, when they had the meeting on January 13, 2004, the board requested a staking out of exactly what was going to be done there when they proposed it, and then it wasn't, the church did nothing, and so the permits lapsed. Would be nice to be able to see an actual staking, maybe with ribbons, just to see what the structure, we could get a visual at least on what's going to be there. I think that would be very helpful before we jump into a decision on this.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess the other question I had was, do any of the neighbors have a direct line of sight to this new structure that's going to be there?
Okay.
If it got passed.
We're going to, I'm going to go back to my Jesuit training and give you a special dispensation. We have an answer to your earlier question. We're going to break a rule and answer.
Who did this plan here? Is the engineer or the architect here? Are you the architect? Correct me if I'm wrong, that proposed building that they're discussing, the ridge height is 18 foot 4 inches, is that correct?
It's not the ridge height. If you look at the model, you see the end walls, these parapet walls, they're projecting up higher than the ridge by about 18 inches. And this footprint is over the existing building. This is not really, even though it's a new structure, it's a footprint that's over the existing building that's there now. That's the same location, we're not changing that. So that's.
But the height of that end wall that you're referring to there is 18.4, is that correct? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. King. Sure. Mr. Tiso, anything further?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your presentation. Would anyone else like to be heard on this application? Sir, come forward. Give us your name and address for the record and speak freely.
Evening, gentlemen. Robert Tambini, 25 Lakeshore Drive. I live in a property that borders the cemetery, as does my father, who is a resident of 2700 Drive. Both properties adjoin the cemetery. Council referenced a letter that he submitted to the board that I believe the members of the community here have not had an opportunity to examine. We'd like the opportunity to examine that letter and respond to it. But what I'd like to address right now is the issue of hardship. Certainly, I can understand that everyone who owns property in the town of Eastchester needs to expend money to maintain that property. The church and the Holy Mount Cemetery, through perhaps a lack of foresight, a lack of planning, have seemed to reach the maximum monetary value of their parcel by selling the individual plots along the way. Now they find themselves in a situation where they would like to use the setback area that is designed to protect adjoining homeowners from intrusion and from building, and I would submit that any time you remove grass and trees to substitute it with stone and mortar, you're going to have drainage issues. As perhaps the board is aware, my neighbor at 23 Lakeshore Drive, a house was built behind them, changed the drainage, the natural drainage that was in place, and they were suffering water damages until the town came in and forced remedial measures to be taken. So my problem with the hardship aspect of their application is I think, hardship can be shown by the adjoining landowners who will suffer a change in the nature and character of the cemetery lands that abut their property and be negatively impacted with that. And the needs of the cemetery should be balanced against the needs of the adjoining landowners and the needs of the town in general, and what impact 1,600 additional burial sites for members of families who will visit during the course of the year. Maybe it won't be full in the next 2 to 3 years, but it will be full eventually, and those people aren't going anywhere, and they will have visitors, and really, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your presentation. Would anyone else like to be heard on this application? Okay. Counselor, would you like to come up and reply?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a couple of points. It was interesting to me that a couple of people came up and complained about the maintenance of the property, which is really part of our argument, that there's a shortfall in funds, and it's difficult to maintain the property. They're already spending $61,000 more a year than they're taking in, and part of it is they want to be able to not make a profit, but to be able to cover the shortfall and do appropriate maintenance of the site and make additional improvements to the site that would be beneficial not only to the church, but to the neighborhood. As your counsel properly pointed out, the issues of drainage and landscaping and parking and all of those things would be part of a site plan review by the planning board, and certainly the planning board would require appropriate landscaping, and these folks who are concerned about that can go to the planning board meetings and express their concerns about the siting, and that can be addressed as part of the planning board, but I don't think that changes the fact that we meet the requirements for the variances. As far as anything else that you might want us to address, if you want us to provide you with additional information, we will.
Thank you, Counselor. So before I drill down on that point, I want to go back to the board after the public has been heard, and the public hearing, a portion of this application is still open. But Mr. Cahalan, you had made some points earlier about the financial hardship, which is a key element of the use variance. I may want some more information on that. You would drill down on that. Do you see that there's more information needed in that vein?
I think the projections need to be tightened up for sure. I think it was, to me, it looked like it was done in a rush to carry a number across a spreadsheet as a copy and paste. I don't know how much time was put into it.
Okay.
So they came up with the initial number.
Okay.
So that, if you're gonna project out, you need to be more accurate. I don't think the projections are that accurate. That's my problem with the financial side of it. I think they haven't spent enough time. To me, on a use variance particularly, I want to see that monetary problem, which is here, but the other side of it being addressed doesn't really satisfy me right now.
Okay. Do you have anything further, Mr. Cahalan? Mr. Miller?
Nope.
Mr. Nerzia?
No.
Mr. DeMarco?
No.
Okay, I have a couple of points.
Mr. Chairman, I
Please,
just want to make
Counselor.
one point. While normally screening and landscaping is an issue involving site plan approval and would be under the umbrella of what the planning board will look at, in a situation like this, where you're also looking at setbacks, and if concerns have been raised about encroachment or setbacks, screening, some type of screening to offset those concerns about setbacks may be an issue that you would want to look into. I don't know.
Counselor, again, we're thinking alike, because if you recall, a couple of months ago, we had an application wherein, on the area variance side of it, we had imposed an obligation to put a certain height of an arborvitae, and although we're not going to get into the genus and species of the plantings here, I think the point is that there could be conditions that are part of actually the area variance. So that's going to be one part of a later motion I'm going to make to get more information. I also, do you have anything further, Counselor? Okay. There was also a reference by someone from the public about a letter that the public didn't see. I wasn't really clear what that was. Are we talking
I'm assuming
about?
it's...
Part of the application, I think.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was-
the application,
Yeah,
okay.
part of the application, and I understand from the building inspector that people came in to the building department to look at the file, if I'm correct.
A couple of people did,
Yeah, a
yes.
couple of people did, so,
Okay.
I mean, it's been there for people to see, what's not hidden.
Right, and as I mentioned in my beginning presentation, everything that you've submitted is a matter of public record. So the public will have an opportunity to review these documents if they would like. Okay, so,
I would
Counsel,
just
please.
suggest that you add that they can contact the building department if you would like to come in and view whatever submissions have been made. They are available, and for those that are watching at home.
Okay. So I think we're going to ask the applicant to amplify the part of the use application that pertains to the financial implications and hardship, not only Mr. Kalen's detailed specifications on the projections, but the cost involved in the build-out, et cetera, because I think that's a key element of any use variance. I think the second thing we'd like to do is have again, suggestions, not a requirement. You're free to pursue your application as you're pursuing it. But if the applicant had any ideas about screening or other issues that have been raised by the public, we'd be happy to hear them. And any other board members have anything to add to what I'm offering here?
Can I just ask a question?
Please, Mr. DeMarco.
I'm looking for the answer in your submission, but maybe, and you may not even know the answer to this. You referred repeatedly to the 2004 variance that was granted by the board in 2004. Why was that never acted upon?
I'm not sure we can provide that information to you.
Well, is there someone that can?
I don't know the details of it. Perhaps Father Sorgi can, but again, he's not here.
Right.
So why don't we, as part of what we put together in response to, and we want to cooperate as much as possible with you because we'd like to provide you the information you need in order to grant the approvals.
Right.
So we'll provide you information on screening. We'll provide you some additional information on the finances. We'll provide why it wasn't developed in 2004. And also we're going to see if we can address the issue a little bit more detail that Mr. DeMarco raised about the parking and so forth on the site. So see if we can give you a better sense
Well,
of
I
that.
appreciate that. Again, it's not required, but it would be helpful. And again, I don't want to make extra work or expense for the applicant. If you do want to address this issue of the precedential value, again, I'm not seeing a need for it because I think simply the arguments made in 2004, many of them have already been made here. But again, if you want to do that, feel free to do that as well. Okay? So I think my first motion is going to be to leave the public hearing open so that when this new materials are submitted, the public will have an ongoing right to continue to review and comment. So I'm going to make that motion. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. DeMarco, all in favor? Aye. Okay. So, Counselor, did you have anything you'd like to add further to what we've?
Not at this time. We'll be on the January agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm now going to move to adjourn this to the January agenda because we're slaves to Robert's rules. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. DeMarco, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll see you in January.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
holiday.
Holidays, plural. Okay, I'm making a motion to adjourn the November meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. DeMarco, all in favor? Aye. Happy holidays to everybody.